Hello, learners. This is Bobby Mahanta from Dhupguri College of Education. Today, I'm starting with learning design. I've divided this lesson into 4 parts in which I will discuss about the concept and characteristics of learning design in the first part. I will cover the importance of learning design in the second part, whereas the objectives and types of learning design will be covered in the third part. Coming to the format of learning design, this will be discussed and shown to you in the fourth part of this lesson. The format will be as per the guideline of our affiliating university, that is the West Bengal University of Teachers Training, Education Planning and Administration. Let us begin with the first part of the lesson, that is concept of learning design. As you see here, it refers to a variety of ways of designing students' learning experiences. It is a framework that supports student learning experiences. It focuses on what the student will do, and it organizes tasks for the learners that are challenging and allow independent and creative work. So when we see to this, we understand that the teacher intends to design the learning experience in a way by making his lesson, by preparing his lesson in a very well organized way. While preparing the lesson, he takes student into consideration, means to whom he is going to teach, and accordingly he tries to select the learning materials. What sort of activities and creative work he will give to the students. Now, why do the teacher need to prepare his lesson? It is all because every teacher a specific time used to be allotted to them, and he has to make best use of the specific time that has been allotted to him. So how will he do? It would only be possible only when he prepares it well in advance, so that relevant information can be communicated to the students. He should see to it that students also participate in the teaching learning process. So the word itself clarifies that a systematic approach is adopted to deal with the lesson. The learner is kept under the topmost priority. Every job requires certain bit of effort to meet the desired goal. Similarly, a teacher's task is to give the best in teaching to enable students to gather the right kind of information. So while preparing the lesson, the teacher is well prepared as what next, what to show while teaching this particular portion, what sort of questions he will be asking the students, what kind of activities will be given to the students, how he is going to evaluate the student's performance, which sort of technologies he needs to use for which level of the students, everything. It is predetermined. The teacher needs to pre-decide before entering the classroom. So learning design seems to be so important for a teacher. Thus, we see that learning design is purely a learner-centric design. The teacher, in fact, he has to be an effective designer. So the teacher needs to exactly know what is his role, what exactly he has to do. This will enable him to deliver relevant information by making use of appropriate and available resources and technologies. If a teacher is well prepared, he will not get confused inside a classroom, and in this way he is not going to waste his time. So we see that the teacher keeps the learner engaged in various activities. So students' participation seems to be very much essential, and therefore if a teacher predetermines that while teaching this, he is going to give this task to the student. So accordingly, while teaching, he will deliver the lesson and he will assign the task to the student. This will give him enough scope to think out of the box. So while students are being made to participate or engage in various kind of activities, or allow them to ask questions or seek more information, in this process what happens? The student is able to think out of the box. So this is very much important. Hence, learning design is a framework that is arranged very sequentially with all necessary steps in order to provide quality education. While preparing the learning design, the teacher needs to keep in mind the learner, the understanding level of the learner, what sort of activities will be assigned to the learner, what is the expected behavioral outcome. So all these the teacher needs to decide while preparing the learning design. Now, when we talk about the expected learning outcome, this implies that as I said, that a specific time is being allotted to the teacher, and in that particular time, the teacher has to introduce the lesson, he has to explain, he has to conclude the lesson. So, while preparing the lesson, the teacher has to know the entry level behavior of the student. So, accordingly, he has to design the lesson in a way that after teaching, this is expected from the student. When there is a positive behavioral change in pupil after the lesson, it is understood that desired learning has taken place. Desirable learning has been taken place. So we see that the expected learning outcome, if it is met, then learning has taken place. So this is something so very important for a teacher. Let us further see the characteristics. This will help us to understand more about learning design. Now, in the characteristics, we see expectations. Okay, in expectations, then instructions, learning activities, assessment. So, when talking about expectation, as I've already stated about the entry behavior and the outcome of the student. If there is a positive behavioral changes, then learning has taken place. So therefore, the teacher has to decide the expected behavioral changes from the pupil. So he has some learning goals, the objectives well listed in advance. Then what sort of questions he's going to ask, what sort of work he is going to assign the students. So in this way, he is not going to waste his time. Next, instruction. We all know teacher is a teacher is the one who can generate information to the student in a purposeful manner. So he is the facilitator. The teacher should see that all relevant informations are being given to the pupil. He shouldn't keep repeating or make use of irrelevant examples. He has to see that while interacting, there is a link between what he has stated earlier to that what he's saying now. He has to see that there is a connection, interlink between the model shown or the chart shown to that what he is explaining. So all these he has to take into consideration. So while designing the lesson, he has to list out as what he is going to do and what is being expected, and for teaching, what are the things that he is going to make use of it. Now, while talking about learning activities, we have to see to it that this particular individual differences is important. We cannot assign the same activities to all the students, because in a class we will have different type of learners. So inclusive learning environment should be created, and teachers should be very careful that he recognizes the individual differences. If the student is bright, he can assign more tasks, he can give a project work, and so on, so forth. So we have to see that the learning activity suits the learner. Now next, assessment. Assessment should be continuous and timely, because until and unless this is done, we cannot modify our teaching, and we will not be able to communicate the matter to the students. So the target group, the audience, the listener, the students, the pupil, the teacher has to be well aware for whom the lesson is being prepared. And accordingly, he delivers the lesson. But after delivering the lesson, the task of the teacher is to take feedback, to collect feedback. This will help a teacher to diagnose how far the student is able to understand what is being taught. Accordingly, he can arrange for tutorial classes, or maybe he can reteach the lesson. So the entry point behavior and the outcome, the teacher has to tally it, whether learning has taken place. If positive behavioral changes has taken place, that means definitely learning has taken place. If the student is not being able to understand, then again the teacher has to rearrange the learning design, and accordingly select the activities, the models, tools, or any other aids depending upon the learner's need. Let us further see. What we have understood is that learning design is always learner centric. It should always be learner centric. Focus on the learner. We have to have a focus on the learner. So in this case, we see that the teacher needs to put oneself in the learner's shoe so that he can understand the situation that is happening with the student. Like some students might feel shy to ask questions. Some students may be slow learner. Maybe the child is not being able to cope up with what is being taught. So what is the need of the learner? We can only understand when the teacher is able to give the right focus to the learner. The teacher needs to have a bird's eye view. This will help a teacher to pay attention to every detail. This is very important. The teacher has to be aware what is happening. He's teaching. What sort of classroom situation it is? Is the environment congenial enough to carry on with the studies, with the lesson? Are the students able to understand well? The teacher needs to see every detail, whether it is the student, the subject content, or the classroom environment. The teacher should be a passionate learner and have a desire to know more. If a teacher himself is passionate learner, he can give best to his student. And only then we can expect something from the student. If a teacher comes up with old lessons, deliver it, and goes back home, then again the next day, if this process continues, then he can never expect better learning outcome among students. While preparing, the teacher has to be very creative himself. So learning design is no joke. It's really no joke. The teacher, while preparing the learning design, he has to be very much careful. He has to be creative. and try to develop ways to present the content in the best way in order to accelerate performance in the best possible way. So we see that we can only get the best in students when the teacher himself is the best. So the teacher needs to be an avid learner, very creative, innovative. He should be an effective communicator. He should be able to clarify doubts. It is only then the student will be attentive and participate in the class. So, clarity in what he is speaking, clarity in the the clarity in what he is saying, clarity in the words pronunciation, clarity in what is shown to the pupil. So if that is there, then definitely the student will be attentive, the student will be motivated to listen and will be willing to participate in the class. He should be in a position to use various teaching aids to maximize teaching. If a teacher simply lectures, if a teacher do not take interest in the pupil, if the teacher himself teaches without taking consideration as to whether the student is understanding or not, then definitely learning will not take place. So, in order to motivate the learner, in order to arouse the interest level of the interest level in students, what the teacher needs to do is make use of different teaching devices, which I've already talked to you in my previous lesson. So this will definitely maximize teaching. Also, the handwriting of the teacher, the gestures, voice modulation are also very essential. The teacher, while using the board, there should be clarity, it should be legible. The teacher should not use the board in a way that the students will be confused. The teacher should use it very neatly. So all these, it is very important. Even the gestures, how the teacher responses, how the teacher moves, how the teacher reinforce the pupil, everything is important. Also the voice modulation is important. It should be very interesting and student oriented. In a gist, the teacher has to know in which way his learner will learn. Accordingly, he can prepare the learning design. I hope you all are clear. If you have any doubts, please feel free to ask. I hope you're clear. So today, what we have discussed? We have discussed about the concept of learning design as well as the characteristics of learning design. In my next lesson, I shall talk about the importance of learning design. I hope you all understood. Thank you. We'll be meeting in the next lesson. Till then, stay fine and healthy.